Cruse versus Rio Trevathen. And they're over on the right, team of MTG Access. We have the Trevathen up top. We have Ben Ragan in the middle seat, Austin Collins in standard. Up against Will Cruse, Todd Anderson, and Phil Smith. We saw them defeat the Storm team yesterday. You see them actually behind both those teams on one loss in that six-way tie for first you mentioned.
Still not a bad spot to be in.
Not at all. Let's start out here. Will Cruse, Underground Sea. Rio's going to take a look at the hand.
And we are really land heavy and really card light. It looks like Will on a mulligan to 5. Hand is
Angler and lands?
Yeah, two Flooded Strand, a Wasteland, and a Gurmag Angler. One thing about mulliganing too here, if that Gurmag Angler is a Deathrite Shaman, you can at least cast it on turn 1, but it's going to be a while before Will has enough cards in graveyard to commit that.
Well, Rio will just make a polluted Delta and then pass back.
Not wise to wasteland that one.
I like that. So he leaves the fetch land up so it can't be wasted. If Rio just has something like a turn 2 Young Pyromancer, I think he could run away with this.
Yeah, he should be pulling pretty far ahead if he can land a threat quickly.
I suppose is one threat better than another here, or just anything?
If it's going to just go unchecked, turn 2 Young Pyromancer is probably the best that you can do. The reason it tends to be on average a little bit weaker than things like Gurmag Angler and True Nemesis is that you can answer it. But if it's not going to be answered and Will has to top deck to answer it, it's going to generate more power over time.
Got a glimpse of affinity there. And it looks like a top deck for Will is going to be a turn 2 Young Pyromancer. So that actually will put pressure on Rio, seeing if he has one of his 4 Lightning Bolts. Or one of his 4 Dazes would be an answer, but I don't think he wants to Daze here against the kind of hand Will has.
Daze would be fine. You know that Will's just playing more lands, so you cash in a Daze pretty much as soon as you can.
Yeah, you'll still make the play.
You don't love picking up your land. A nice thing that happens here, if Rio has a Lightning Bolt, sometimes you'll wait until your own turn to make a land drop to play around Daze, but he's seen Will's hand.
Yeah, he doesn't have to.
He knows that this Young Pyromancer is the card that Will drew for turn. Gitaxian Probe can make some of those decisions pretty lame.
Same time, Rio's going to crack his fetch land as well. It's Young Pyromancer off the top for Will. Because Rio just saw Cruse's hand, he knows that this Pyromancer was drawn, so he still has perfect information. You see a bit of a smile on his side, saying, all right, I see what you did. And Rio just fetching up Underground Sea, so no Lightning Bolt.
I believe I've spotted at least one Force of Will in Rio's hand, and
might be worth it.
It's not great in the matchup, but once your opponent mulligans, you can blow those.
Yeah, and he dazes. He did float the mana before dazing too. Now, he knows there's not a daze, but that's just good form.
It looks like Rio has 2 Force of Wills, and as I was saying, you want to cash in the daze as soon as possible, and then down the road, he'll be able to pitching force on the Gurmag Angler.
So this time Rio builds up with starting with Volcanic Island and passes back to Cruse. Does have the force. He unfortunately picked up one of those 2 main deck Spell Pierce on the turn. That's a card that is likely dead in the matchup.
Does not do too much, especially if your opponent's just drawing a lot of lands.
And another great top deck for Cruse. He draws top decks Deathrite Shaman and Wastelands away the Volcanic. And yeah, that'll earn the Force of Will pitching Spell Pierce.
And Rio still has access to that second Force of Will for the Gurmag Angler. You go down cards every time you Force of Will, but Will mulligan twice. Rio's on the draw as well. Don't really have to care as much about the card economy.
Even so, this game's been closer than I thought it would be, Ryan. It seemed, I guess Will off that hand has drawn Pyromancer into Deathrite, but if say one of those draws turns into a land, this game becomes so much easier for Rio.
Yeah, it would be nice. One thing about it, the game is shaping up. There's interaction back and forth on the early turns, but at some point, Will is going to brick, and Rio is just going to pull ahead. It's not a deck that has immense closing speed. You're going to play a lot of turns in the early game where you're posturing, playing back and forth position, and eventually Rio's going to do exactly this.
Here's Gurmag Angler, and
pull very far ahead.
Now, on Will's side, he has a Gurmag. He's going to be able to Gurmag of his own. He has a fetch land here. That'd be 5th card in graveyard, 3 mana. But you mentioned there's still Force plus blue card in Rio's hand.
Right, and Will needs to have something that he's top deck on this turn to make a game of it against that. Now, if Will could cast Angler and has picked up Daze on this turn, that's something, because Rio, because of that Wasteland, doesn't have any mana available to fight over that.
So Will Flooded Strand, 5 cards in graveyard, going to go find a third land. That makes 8. 1 extra for Gurmag if he needs. So he can Gurmag through a daze.
Yeah, just leaving the land on tap and exiling the graveyard, probably the play here. In the Grixis Delver mirror, there's not too much that plays your graveyard. Typically, it's exiling cards to Deathrite Shaman or drawing another Gurmag Angler are the two things you think about. Will is so far off of casting a second Gurmag Angler that you want to play around days.
And that's what he's going to do. Delves 5, taps 2. And Rio's going to force pitching another Spell Pierce. Well, the 2 main deck Spell Pierces aren't good, but Rio's done the best with it. They both pitch to force.
Yep.
What's the thing? Blue cards can only be so bad.
Exactly.
They all pitch to force.
They always do something.
And Will has drawn another threat. His last card was Delver of Secrets, now empty-handed.
The deck may be called Grixis Delver, but...
Grixis Angler sounds like a better deck right now.
Right.
Brainstorm from Rio.
Yeah, plenty of cards up in hand. He'll be going down to 3 after resolving this Brainstorm.
And what I like, and I think I mentioned this with Delver, is that I don't even feel that Rio has to find an answer to this Delver.
No, he just has a 4-turn clock here, and even if the Delver transforms, it needs help to be close to fast enough.
Rio will Wasteland away the Volcanic Island. Remember, with their configurations, Will only has 1 other Volcanic in the deck.
And in order to bridge the gap on this race, Will's really looking to draw lightning bolts, and without that Volcanic Island, wouldn't be able to cast them. And
his Delver didn't flip. If it flipped, transformed this turn, we would have had a race that was close, but it did not. First match result in on the standard table. Cruse's teammate Phil Smith takes game 1 with mono red. Angler, though, will hit it and send Will down to 8. Rio looking to even the score, and he's gotten ahead. It looks like he'll be up to the task. Can transform that Delver of Secrets off a daze.
It's one of those ones where you almost don't want to reveal.
Yeah.
Because it's so bad.
Yeah. His hand now a fetch land and a daze. 2 more hits from the Angler. Or 1 plus the Lightning Bolt will do it.
Yep. Rio does fetch down to 9, though. Fairly safe to do that because it would take 2 Lightning Bolts from Will to catch up to this clock.
Yeah, and his mana just doesn't do that.
Yep. Yeah, he may have 2 cards in hand, but he just has 2 black mana available.
We have 1 open seat for our next Dominaria booster draft. If you would like to draft the new set, then we got one. Thank you.
Rio setting up here. Gurmag Angler, mentioning just really powerful in this matchup once it resolves. There's no clean answer, nothing like a, what would I say, Terminate. I don't.
Sometimes you see a main deck Diabolic Edict.
Okay.
It's mostly because Merit Lage exists, but
sure.
Angler's not a bad one to hit.
What are other kinds of the 1 mana kill spells you might see?
You
Murderous
dance with
Cut.
the idea of putting Dismember in your deck sometimes.
Okay.
There's matchups where it's particularly bad, but it's pretty good in the mirror.
I suppose that's better than Murderous Cut.
Yeah. Well, also because you just need to have a graveyard for your Gurmag Angler, and sometimes they shaman you off of being able to delve.
Will hit down to 3 draws, no answer. So Rio Trevathen takes game 1, evens the score at 1 game apiece for their teams. They're going to go to the sideboard, and we'll check in on that modern match in just a minute. And we're back here. Let's look over the sideboards. Players playing nearly the same main deck, but their sideboards actually have some differences. On Will Cruse's side, 3 Cabal Therapy, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Price of Progress, 2 Surgical Extraction, Ancient Grudge, Diabolic Edict, Dismember, and Marsh Casualties. On Rio's side, he has the same Flusterstorms, Pyroblasts, and Surgical Extractions. He has only 2 Cabal Therapies. He has an Abrade, which Will does not. He has the same Grudge Edict. He has 1 fewer Price of Progress. He has the same Marsh Casualties, but he gets to add Umezawa's Jite and Pithing Needle, which Will doesn't have. So a lot of the same cards and then a couple of the extras.
Sideboarding in here generally not very exciting. You're looking for things that 1-for-1 with the right card. So on Will's side, those 2 Pyroblasts, they fight over True Nemesis, sometimes Ponder. They can kill a Delver. All that stuff plays.
So Pyroblast from both players.
Yep. Diabolic Edict, it can answer True Nemesis, and Gurmag Angler. That one's pretty important.
Marsh casualties from both players. It answers
Definitely
true name.
Answers true name and Young Pyromancer and all of his friends. So that
All right.
one's great. Dismember also answers Gurmag
Right.
Angler. And then for Rio, that GT, that can be extremely impactful. It's hard to convert that in older builds of Delver, but once you have Deathrite Shaman, it becomes a lot easier. 4 mana is just very doable.
Yeah, so they both have the first 4 cards, and we have then the ones that are different. A Dismember on Will's side, and then on Rio he has a GT and the Abrade, perhaps?
Yeah, it's not terrible to bring in a Braid. It answers most of the threats. It doesn't answer Angler or do anything about True Nemesis, but
Right.
so that's true of a lot of your cards.
Well, that's why Dismember might be a bit of an upgrade, because specifically it answers
Yeah.
Gurmag Angler.
Dismember generally going to be better than a Braid. Sometimes when you're trying to peel a removal spell, say you've already taken a hit from the Angler, maybe a Delver has hit you, Dismember can be kind of awkward. You do have access to black mana in these decks, though, so it has to be a couple things. You have to be a little bit behind and be choked on black mana, and then Dismember can be pretty poor, but on average, it is going to be better.
So, Ryan, what's the reason we're seeing Abrade see play in Legacy? You know, 3 damage for 2 mana is not good enough for the Legacy format when it only hits a creature, but we have been seeing it show up. I believe there's a 4 of in the mono-red prison deck. What are the artifacts they're so worried about?
That was kind of amusing to me because the card that it is actually the perfect card against is Mono Red Prison, because it's a 2-mana spell that deals with Chalice of the Void. It also kills all the threats, say Goblin Rabblemaster, Magus of the Moon against a deck like that. Largely, it is just this 2-mana spell that's good against Chalice of the Void decks.
Okay.
If your opponent's playing Stoneforge Mystic, it can either deal with the Mystic itself or blow up the Batterskull GT, what have you. It's good against decks like Death and Taxes for that same reason.
Okay, so Chalice of the Void is the main artifact that you're trying to destroy with when you register Abrade?
Yeah, and
There's others.
the splash damage against Stoneforge Mystic is very relevant.
All right, all game 1's in the books. Todd Anderson, actually, on the Modern table with humans, takes game 1. That one's a bit of a surprise to me. Though I guess I shouldn't be surprised by Todd Anderson taking wins.
Yeah, it definitely is a winnable game 1, but for Ben Ragan, you do not like being down a game in that matchup.
I mean, with Affinity, I think one of the draws to the deck is your win percentage in game 1s, just in general. I wouldn't be surprised. It's over 70. Good. You know, this next game 1 is just fantastic.
Yeah, as long as you don't have to mulligan low, you're typically running away with your game 1s.
All right, we are underway. Both players on 7 here for game 2. Will Cruse starting off with Ponder.
Sigh of relief from Rio as Ponder is not Deathrite Shaman, but it's not the worst way to spend your first turn.
Yeah, we did see with our last game, neither player really getting a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman. Will tried to make one, I think, on turn 3, but then it was met with a removal spell.
Yep.
Or with a Force of Will.
This time looks like both players are on 7, so we should have a more interesting game.
You know, it actually kept pretty interesting. Rio had to Force of Will twice, so he did bring himself down to Will's number of cards, but that was all part of the plan as the Gurmag Angler got to resolve.
Well, Will wasn't only on 5. It was also like a 4-lander, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose the 4th land just isn't a card in this matchup.
No, not particularly. It can matter, but not when it's 4 of your 5 cards.
And here's the turn 1 Deathrite Shaman from Rio. It dodges by a daze.
Yeah, we'll
the
see if it gets bolted anyway.
The dazes are still in the deck, right?
Typically, yeah, you can go lower on them. It can be difficult to convert, but it's generally better than Spell Pierce, partially because it's one of your answers to True Nemesis. It also can put your opponent off balance if the plan is turn 2 Young Pyromancer without a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman.
Volcanic Island from Will.
One thing about these blue mirrors, it used to be the case that you would board all of your Force of Wills out because they were so bad. The impact of True Name Nemesis was high enough that you kind of want to have about 2 copies in your deck.
Lightning Bolt takes care of Deathrite Shaman. Absolutely right. We go back over to Rio.
We'll see if Rio is able to produce another threat, though for now, Will not really on the battlefield in a meaningful way.
It looks like Rio has his choice. He can go for another Deathrite Shaman or a Delver of Secrets. You have a preference here?
I kind of like playing the Delver. You would rather stick Deathrite Shaman is part of that.
Oh, how about this Brainstorm?
The other thing is that one of the removal spells that you want to get out of your opponent's deck. If they draw it, you kind of want to invite them to cast a Marsh Casualties on one of your bad cards. If you can get them to cast that on Delver, that's a pretty big win.
Now, Ryan, if Rio had the option to make a Delver, but he cast Brainstorm instead, if he's doing that with his blue mana, do you think he's actually just going to shuffle away the Delver at this point?
It's entirely possible, especially if he just has other threats. If he has,
does. He has Gurmag and Deathray.
Oh, yeah. With those two, I'm not super interested in having Delver.
But the deck's named Grixis Delver. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, deck names have come a long way in some respects. This is not one of them, I don't think. We can start calling it Grixis Deathrite at some point.
I want Grixis Angler. So he did actually keep the Delver. He'll make that with the other land. He completes the Brainstorm by cracking a fetch and does make Delver of Secrets here. Playing right into a possible Daze, I think he'd be very happy to earn a Daze with this.
Oh, yeah. You also just play into Daze if you ever draw a True Name Nemesis. It's like, Daze anything but this card.
Yeah.
Tap all my mana for whatever reason.
Once the True Name gets on the table, the whole game changes.
Oh, yeah, very dramatically, especially for Rio because he has the GT in his deck that Will does not have.
If somehow GT gets connected to True Name, that's it.
It's so unbeatable. It's just unreal.
Will, a lot of options here. Deathrite Shaman of his own, Wasteland, Young Pyromancer, all among his options here. I believe he also has True Name Nemesis that he could try for.
Once again, Will is kind of long on lands. Yeah. You see two more dual lands hanging on the back of the hand in the Wasteland here.
Do you have a preference here, Ryan? You're going to go with Young Pyromancer and leave up Wasteland, and then waste away a Volcanic. He could have tried for True Name Nemesis this turn.
I love everything about this play. One, you're giving respect to Daze. You're not tapping all of your mana. Two, you're Wastelanding the red source for Rio, so maybe your True Name can't be Pyroblasted down the road.
A blind flip for Rio, and it's a nice one. He flips off Lightning Bolt here, which you just saw Young Pyromancer be made on Will's side. I'm all about this.
Yeah, get that one. And now if Will wants, because Will used the Wasteland, if he wants a True Name on the next turn, he will have to play into Daze again. Though, notably, with Rio Lightning Bolting the Pyromancer, he won't be able to represent Pyroblast. So you still might see that be the line. Once you start taking hits from the Aberration, it does kind of put a rush on actually resolving a threat of your own. You see Lightning Bolt takes care of the Pyro there. The Aberration comes across.
So there's some damage, and now Rio going to delve a full yard here for Gurmag Angler.
I like this, especially if Rio doesn't have a Daze.
Okay.
Because if Cruse dazes this, then he won't even be able to cast a True Name on the following turn.
Okay, yeah, you worry on Will. If Rio doesn't have Daze, he says, I can't defend against True Name, so please pick up your land.
Right. And then if the True Name even shows up, all it's doing is checking the Gurmag Angler if the Gurmag Angler resolves. So that's really good positioning. Here's True Name Nemesis, and Rio even has the Daze. So we're going to fight over that, and the True Name gets Daze, and Rio's just winning this on every front now. And this is a two-turn clock.
Wow, yeah, he had the Daze. So True Name's down, swings 8, Will down to 8. The only removal spell for Gurmag is that Dismember, but Will's at 8. He can't do that kind of play.
No. If he has another land, I think. If you have Bolt plus Dismember, it wouldn't cost you any life. You'd be playing into another Daze, but you just kind of have to make that plan. Can't really afford to take more damage here. I can't get a great look at the spells Will has, but he has at least another land in hand. Starts with Gitaxian Probe. That one not great from here. We see Pyroblast, Abrade, and Lightning Bolt. Yeah,
and that's going to be it. And multiple Lightning Bolts. Yeah. So Rio Trevathen, 2-0, defeats Will Cruse. He gets a win for his team. Now he's going to need a comeback from one of his teammates. And Austin Collins might have answered the challenge. He just took Game 2 in Standard. We're going to take a quick break while those players shuffle up for Game 3. And we come back, we'll see whether or not Austin can put MTG Access at the top of the leaderboard. Well, during the break, Rio getting help from both teammates. Ben Ragan evens things up against Todd Anderson as well. So Anderson and Smith will both be on the play for their respective Game 3s. They both need to win if their team wants to stay in first.
You like Anderson's odds on the play in the post-sideboard matches. We'll see how things shape up in the Smith v. Collins battle. Players shuffling up for game
Yeah,
3.
that's our modern seat going on in the one. We're actually going to watch standard here. There we go. So blue-white control versus mono-red. Ryan, I mentioned earlier when it was straight blue-white approach was in standard. It was a pretty good deck, but it really struggled against red. So you'd see things like their sideboard would be 3 Authority of the Councils, 4 Regal Caracals. Now, what I believe has changed this matchup is the card Lyra Dawnbringer.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not surprising to me that Phil wins game 1, Austin took game 2. Do we see some Lyras here?
Oh, my. There's 3 copies in the sideboard.
Yeah.
And that...
The card's incredible against red. Hit or miss. I've seen, we saw a game where I believe against him, Julian John played one, and then immediately a Soul Scar Mage was on defense. And wow, what a bad card. But here it looks great.
The ceiling is extremely high. Even when you play those low floor games, inevitably you get to a spot where you're out of cards and the Bomat Courier at least draws you another card. Wow. So the floor is really not even that low.
The all haste deck going on for Phil. Tries on-crop Crasher, plays it right into an Essence Scatter, but he didn't care. That gets countered, swings in with Couriers again. Austin to 15, and now the Couriers have 3 and 2 cards under them. That's starting to matter. Austin cycling Cast Out. Maybe does he have the land?
Oh, no.
He does not.
This is looking to be a runaway for Phil Smith. I was about to say that the blue-white control deck really doesn't even have anything meaningful on turn 3 anyway, so we're really kind of building up to get to Settle the Wreckage, Fumigate, that kind of thing, but missing that land drop, that might just close it.
Well, Phil doesn't have the land drop either. He does have a Soul Scar Mage as he passes.
I'm going to
point
out some groundbreaking analysis here, but the red deck kind of wants to miss land drops. The blue-white deck has to make them.
There's land 3 for Austin. He's only down to 13 because actually are all just 1/1s. So despite taking all the hits. However, we have a Bomat Courier with 4 cards under it, about to have 5. If Phil really wants the more things, he's got some play here. 4th land was drawn by Phil, 2 Chandras. He's going to pre-combat make a Chandra. That'll get hit by Disallow. But Prowess triggers on Soulscar Mage, a swing for 4, and cards. We have a 5-card Courier and a 4-card Courier as Austin goes down to 9.
Also worth remembering, at some point, if Austin has, say, a Settle the Wreckage on time, Phil can sacrifice 1 Courier, sacrifice the other in response, and then have an 8-card hand or a 9-card hand or whatever.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 9. Right now it's 9 cards.
That's not a low number.
Okay. I like that play you mentioned. That was good.
Well, that would even be if Austin was making land drops, which he's just not
Yeah,
doing.
he cycled Cast Out for a land drop, but it didn't work. Here's Hazaret from Phil.
Yeah, that's only 1 shy of lethal. Hazaret does a pretty good job at closing from 1.
Yeah, he puts Austin down to 1. And, Ryan, we're never going to even see the 6-card Bomat Courier get sacrificed, and that's tragic.
Yeah,
because I like drawing cards. Phil Smith takes the match over Austin Collins, and that's a win. So it's now down to Todd Anderson and Ben Ragan. Said Rio needed help from one of his teammates. Austin was not able to do it there. We'll see whether Ragan can do it. This was Humans versus Affinity. And we look at Todd's side. All right. Well, we've had some good things going on. It looks like Thalia's Lieutenant has put a counter. We have 2 counters on all the creatures. 3 Noble Hierarchs with the Lieutenant. Not usually how this works.
That's a lot of power, though. No flyers just yet, and that Vault Scourge has a nice-looking hat. Vault Scourge plus Cranial Plating, one of the ways that you can break open this matchup. It looks like Ben hasn't been able to deal any damage yet in this game, though. That's going to be a problem.
Thalia's Lieutenant swinging, and that's a very exalted Lieutenant. It is a 3/3 turning into a 6/6. But I agree, you got to watch out for this Vault Scourge.
Vault Scourge looks like it has 8 power, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 artifacts in the Vault Scourge base rate. So you'd see a trade there, and Ben would gain 8 life. Then he can put the Cranial Plating on the other Vault Scourge for a crackback.
Now the full team on board. You see both Rio Trevathen and Austin Collins talking here with Ragan.
Find out exactly what Anderson has for a follow-up, but just with this wide board, no pre-combat effects. If you had something like a Reclamation Sage, you'd likely see that on the Cranial Plating pre-combat. So it's kind of unlikely that Todd has a great follow-up here. If you had a Staticaster, you'd probably be seeing that happen as well. There's 2 Staticasters in the sideboard. He's actually gotten Vithian Renegades over Reclamation Sage. You have seen some Sages, but same effect either way. You would have seen it pre-combat. Team doing some deliberation on how to manage this. I'm pretty sold on just blocking with the Vault Scourge.
On surface, that seems pretty good.
I suppose you play into Reflector Mage if you make that line, because you do want to crack back with one of these Vault Scourges. And given that
get
Todd,
another life gain.
Given that Todd did nothing pre-combat, it feels like it could be a Reflector Mage.
This is interesting. So he's going to block, and then before damage, put a counter on the other Vault Scourge. And that does play on one of the Scourges. That does play on Reflector Mage pretty well. Takes no damage. Back over to Ben.
Second plating would be choice.
Ornithopter.
Not so much.
3 mana. Could still be second plating. It's Etched Champion, however.
That one's not bad.
I like that with Cranial Plating. That's great against Reflector Mage.
Yeah, I mentioned before, Todd has no flyers.
Count here. 1, 2 artifacts on the lands. And then we have 6 up top. Oh, I like this a lot, Ryan. This is 10. That's why they counted it out. Ben up to 18. Todd's down to 10. And then if he can take a hit and move the plating to Etched Champion, that's 10 more, and it's lethal.
Yeah. Can't do anything about that.
This line they played here is one of the reasons why I think people say Affinity is such a hard deck. This was not obvious.
Yes.
And remember, between that Etched Champion hand and the Ornithopter they drew, one of those was off the top of the deck. He didn't just get to look at his hand and say, oh yeah, I have 10. That was the playing to outs as well. That was a probabilistic decision.
And they take it
Todd
down.
can't do it. He looks at that, says, I'm going to take 10 more next turn, shakes the hand, and what a consensus play there from the team on that block. They played toward this out. They are rewarded, and with that, Team MTG Access up to the top of the standings, 9-1.
Yeah, they'll be